right, you guys. Hope you all are having a great evening. Thanks so much for joining. Ben, can you hear me? Just do a quick mic check.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I sure can. Thanks, man. All right, looks like we got a few people in tonight. Looking forward to sharing with you guys a bunch of really good stuff. Just thank you so much for giving us some time tonight and the chance to connect. Looks like we've got some. If you guys, first off, if you guys are able to, feel free to leave a note in the chat where you're from. I see Boris. I'm not sure where you're from, but welcome. Daniel, it says California, so welcome. Jack, hi, buddy. Got a few others that I don't really see the name, but so anyways, really excited for tonight. And before moving on to the presentation, would love just to first introduce Ben, who really excited to have him on with me again tonight. Ben, what's up, buddy?
Hey, how you doing? So excited to be here. You know me, I love talking mortgage. I love talking real estate. So very excited about tonight's webinar.
Yeah, definitely, man. I am too. Well, you are an expert in a lot of different ways, so I'm excited to have everybody learn a little bit more about just kind of your take, just how you approach real estate, especially right now, since it's such a pretty challenging, unique time to be trying to buy and sell down here in Denver, Colorado. So it looks like some of you guys are from out of state, so welcome. And we're just going to go ahead and jump right into it. In the class tonight, though, we're going to be basically just going through a lot of stuff, kind of be like information from a fire hose. So we're going to hit on a lot of topics, a lot of different tactics, tips, all that good stuff. But we're going to be going pretty quick. So what I'm going to hopefully do is just accomplish getting the basics out to you in the presentation. And then if you guys have any questions, we're going to have a Q&A, live Q&A at the end. Feel free to reach out with any questions you have at that point. And then also at the end, I'll be sharing with you guys some links to schedule a strategy session. We do these one-on-one strategy sessions, which are really helpful if you have some specific type questions that are maybe better addressed on a one-on-one type scenario. So looking forward, though, to getting into it. So why you guys are here? Well, hopefully it's because you're just interested in real estate here in Denver, Colorado, the Mile High City. It does look like we have a mixture of people from both already here in Colorado and maybe some from out of state considering moving here. So obviously this is a great state to live. I love Denver. I've been a Colorado native my entire life, and Ben and I have actually known each other for over 30 years. We went to high school together in Wheat Ridge, which is on the west side of town. But anyways, you guys are probably here just to learn more about real estate and some of these tactics we're going to share with what people are doing still. Some of our clients, some of our friends, family, just people we are interacting with on a daily basis and how they're still winning. So we're going to go through a lot of that. Also going to talk about just some of these other tools, some of these other resources that I'll be sharing with you. Looks like I lost Ben. Hopefully he'll jump back on here in a second. Oh, here he is. Yep, there he is. Hey, Ben, lost you there.
I'm sorry about that. There was a drop in the internet there.
Yeah, no worries, man. I was just sharing just kind of what we're going to cover tonight. So I'll let you kind of give a little intro here in a second. But what I was going to just kind of share first with the audience is these are kind of like the four main reasons right now, the four big challenges that a lot of people are faced with that are considering buying a home. So I'm guessing one of these might be applying to anybody that's watching tonight. The first one, just saving for a down payment. A lot of people are struggling, especially if they have that kind of that misnomer of really needing to have 20% down. It's actually a lot lower than that. The average for a first-time home buyer is actually 9%, but Ben's going to share with you guys some ways to even have it down to as little as 3.5%. So we'll be sharing some of that with you. A lot of other people, though, they're just really having a hard time understanding the market. It's very different right now with how we've done pretty much a complete 180 from about 2 or 3 years ago, where it was a very strong seller's market. And now it's actually the opposite. It's a really strong buyer's market. So just some of that stuff is something that's challenging for a lot of people just to kind of understand these changes that we're seeing right now. Another one, though, could be writing competitive offers. That's where I'm going to kind of step in here in a bit and share some strategies for really what it takes to stand out and get your offer accepted over others. Since it is a buyer's market right now, buyers have the upper hand. So there's some of these strategies that we can implement and really help you guys get a great price on the home and just hopefully get a little bit better deal. So we're sharing that with you. And then the last one is also one that I'm going to dive a little bit more into, which is just how to find the right home. And this is going to be really important for anybody that might be out of state. We do a really good job just with kind of helping not be a tour guide, but just really showcase, what the different areas are in Denver. Because, I mentioned that Ben and I are both, Denver, Colorado. I'm a native. Ben's practically a native. He's been here 35 years or something. But just basically just understanding that there's a lot of different parts of town, a lot of stuff to really understand if you aren't from here, to make sure you're making the right decision when it comes to finding the next home here in Colorado. So I'll just run through this really quick. I don't want to be bragging about myself, but just to kind of give you guys a little bit of background on, why
Please brag. Please brag.
so why it's worth listening to us. Like I said, a 42-year Colorado and Denver native. This past year, I was ranked 5th out of just under 350 agents here in Denver for eXp Realty. Top 10% overall in Colorado. Did about $8 million in personal sales last year. I've got a few certifications. The one I utilize the most is the real estate negotiation expert, but also with Express Cash Offers. And you guys may have found me just through my YouTube channel, Living in Denver. I do weekly videos about just all things Denver, best places to live, some of my favorite areas, restaurants, just everything you can think of. So if you guys haven't found that yet, definitely look it up on YouTube, just Living in Denver with Adam. And Ben and I are actually both co-hosts of the Pursuit of Progress podcast as well. So if you guys like audio format, check us out on Spotify or on Apple. And we also have a video version that goes out every week as well. And got a bunch of Google reviews you can search in case you just want to get a little bit more background on my credibility. But I really would love to share a little bit more about Ben. So Ben, by the way, Ben, I'm going to stop talking and let you chime in here in a second. But just to kind of just share what I think is so great about why I'm happy to have you on tonight with everybody. You're also, I put Colorado native. I know you're practically, I think, did you move here when you're about 5? Is it from Kansas,
No,
right?
I am a Colorado native, born at Lutheran Hospital.
Oh.
I left Denver after I graduated from school for about 10 years, but I was born and raised here, went to Wheat Ridge High School, went to CU. My kids were born in Arizona. We moved back when they were 4 and 5. So I consider them, quasi-natives.
Mm-hmm. You got a ton of experience. I know it's over 22 years, but just I think maybe you can just share with everybody about not that specifically the amount of time, but how you've really done everything that you can in the industry, from loan origination to underwriting. Give a little background on that.
Yeah, one thing that makes me unique as a mortgage professional is I've done really every area in mortgage. So I've been a mortgage processor, I've worked in the closing department, I've worked in compliance, I've worked at the rate lock desk. I was also a mortgage underwriter for about 10 years. And so because I have all of these diverse skills, it allows me to provide a higher level of customer service with the individuals that I work with. I'm also able to underwrite every loan application and all of the financials myself. I don't have to hand that off to someone else. And then most importantly, it just allows me to get, because of the knowledge, the skills, and the expertise and the experience, I'm able to get my customers into the right loan program the first time, based off of what they qualify for in tandem with what their goals are.
Love it, man. You've helped a ton of people, over 300 million in home loans, over 700 families. The Scotsman Guide Award is definitely no small thing. That's a very massive award. Is it the top 0.5%, or what's the qualification for that?
It changes every year based off of volume. This past year, you had to originate 25 million or greater in volume, and depending on the market, the criteria can change every year. But I've qualified for that 4 out of the last 6 years.
Way to go, man. And what I look up to, I think probably more than any of these other things, is just your ability to, at pretty young age, really build up this real estate portfolio of rental properties. Ben has a bunch of VRBO short-term rentals in Arizona, Oklahoma, just kind of all over the place, but just very, very just qualified to understand the ins and outs of real estate investing, and somebody that I learn from every time I talk to about that specifically. So I'm excited just to have you on and sharing some of that with the group here tonight as well.
Oh, well, I'm so glad to be here. It's an honor and a privilege for me. And thank you so much for the invitation.
Yeah, buddy. All right, guys. Well, that's enough about us. Let's get into this. I want to give you guys as much value as we can. So understanding today's local market, obviously there's, differences between the local and also the national market, but here in Denver, we are definitely seeing that it is a buyer's market. So there's actually some articles that have been in the news this past week. I saw one yesterday that there's basically, I should have checked this before I started talking. I think is it 500, for nationally, I think there's 500,000 more homes for sale than there are buyers, right?
Yes, there's a significant amount more homes for sale than there are buyers. Now, part of the issue is that there just aren't as many buyers right now. When you look at the overall numbers, they're not that outrageous, but in relation to the amount of buyers in the market, that's where it really compounds.
Mm-hmm. And I think what's going to be really helpful for you guys tonight from Ben's perspective is what is so challenging in Denver is the price of real estate is quite high when you compare that with the median household income. So when you have other states like in the Sun Belt or like we were just talking about in Arizona or Oklahoma, it's not quite as massive of a disparity between the two. Somebody in Arizona still might be making, let's just use $100,000 a year as their salary, but the homes are 3 to 500,000. Here in Denver, that same $100,000 salary, but the homes might be 6, 7, 800,000. So there's just this big challenge, I'd say, with that specifically. That's one of the things that I'm seeing as a realtor all the time, just getting qualified, and now with the higher interest rates that from a surface level, a lot of people are just not even considering buying a home. They think it's just out of their reach. And excited just to share with you guys, there's still definitely ways to make it happen if that's a goal of yours and a priority. So we're going to dive into that tonight. So I want to just start off before handing it over to Ben on just some kind of a recap of a few metrics. So I always like to use the phrase, if you don't measure it, you can't manage it. And what I do is, so we do these webinars about every 2 weeks. And I like to always give the most updated information through a site, which is DMAR. In Denver, we have the Denver Metro Association of Realtors, and they put out a weekly recap of all of the statistics from all of the listing data, just everything that's happening in the current market here in Denver. And I like to just compile that and put it just into little bullet points during these master classes, just to share with you guys what's happening right now. So I don't have the most recent week as far as the 19th through the 25th today, but this is the most recent data. So this is, including Father's Day weekend as an example. So inventory and market demand. Inventory is definitely continued to have a modest climb throughout middle of June, still well above 2024, although that gap is starting to narrow. New listings did dip a little bit before the weekend, last weekend with Father's Day, but definitely still stronger than this time in 2024. And we've been seeing a lot of coming soon listings, but this has been trending down both week over week and year over year. And I think that also is because of the Father's Day weekend, but also now as we're going into next week, which is July 4th weekend, that's typically a fairly slow week for activity. So, me, for example, I have a new listing. We purposely, did not have it go live or even as coming soon right before the holiday because we just know there won't be as many eyeballs on the property on Zillow and everywhere else during that time. So that's going to change though, and going into the July and August and throughout the rest of 2025. As far as buyer activity and demand, there's definitely some pending transactions that have been holding pretty steady compared to the week prior, still pacing ahead of 2024. There are some active buyers out there, but what we're really seeing is they're more patient. They're not just biting at the first chance. They're, doing a little bit more. I don't know what the best word to use. Just they're patient. They're really, doing their due diligence. They're realizing that they have an upper hand right now. Buyers do, where they can, maybe put in a little bit lower of an offer than what the home's listed for, or maybe they're willing to, spend the next weekend looking for a few other homes instead of having this sense of urgency and feeling like they need to, write an offer immediately. There's also the odds of selling, which have been really just changing a lot over the last month or so. Typically we were seeing, a couple of years ago, it was 2 days, 3 days, 4 days was the amount of days on market. Now we're seeing it up to right around a month, about 30 days. And that is still a little bit below last year. And that is just, again, due to this high inventory of homes and the buyers that aren't just jumping at the first chance. They're being a little bit more patient. So time on market and selling speed, the showings declined again, probably due to the Father's Day weekend last week. They're still outperforming 2024. And on average, homes are receiving right now about 1 showing per week. And that is a sign of steady, but definitely slower traffic. I have a listing right now and we had 2 showings last week. So I was excited about that, but that's still a lot lower than anytime you're selling a home that you want to see. You always want to see as many, showings per week as possible. And buyers, again, are just not feeling that urgency. As far as pricing strategies and seller adjustments, this is a crazy one. Nearly half of the homes that went under contract had at least 1 price cut. And that was a sharp jump from the week before. So definitely starting to see more and more price adjustments going into the middle of the summer, which tends to be a little bit slower for buyers. And then this cuts, they are a little bit slightly smaller on average. So they are having these price adjustments, but they're not massive adjustments. So, buyers just are, it's important that buyers are aware of that and have that expectation. And Ben, you want to just add anything from these past two slides on what you're seeing just in the market right now?
Yeah, I think it's so important to really understand this, especially the pricing strategies and seller adjustments, because that is really what defines the market if you're a buyer. So it's so important for buyers to know right now, if you are in the market to buy, that you have the upper hand. You have more leverage right now today than you've had in the last 10 to 15 years. I mean, look at those statistics. 50% of homes listed have had sales price reductions. I think another 40% had closed with some type of concession. So what I'm seeing on my end on the deals that I'm working in are buyers are able to negotiate sales price reductions. Not just that, but also getting the seller to pay for a portion, or in some cases, all of the closing costs. There's also been examples of getting a credit from the seller to the buyer to do a temporary interest rate buy down to help with affordability, because right now in Denver, affordability is the name of the game. That's why buyers a little bit maybe more reluctant, or they're evaluating, they're taking their time a little bit. They're being a little bit more cautious. But there are ways to get all of your goals met if you are a buyer, and whether it's interest rate, monthly payment, there are ways to make that happen.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to share this at the end of the video, but this is kind of piggybacking off of what I said earlier about getting all this information from a fire hose. There's over 2 hours of video content that I've created that goes through the entire home buyer journey from start to finish. It's over 5 videos. So you guys can definitely dive into that too if you have maybe just some questions or concerns, or just you want to get a little bit more educated on a specific part of the home buyer journey. So we're going to talk about everything in the home buyer journey tonight. But if you want to dive a little deeper, that's just another resource you guys have available to you. So I'll be sharing the link for all of these in an email immediately after tonight's masterclass. But you can also just go to the website URL that I have on the screen here, homebuyervideos.adamsillsdenver.com. So Ben, why don't you run us through the buyer's roadmap? That's a good segue into just what to expect if you guys haven't ever bought a home before, or maybe it's been a while, just to kind of share, kind of from start to finish what the process is.
Yeah, there are really 8 important steps, and I'm going to be brief on each of these because I know that we're going to touch on some more, a little bit more in depth here. But number one, you want to identify and meet with the real estate professional. Who are you going to work with? Who are you going to represent? You want to make sure that you're working with someone like Adam, who's not going to be afraid to have those tough conversations or negotiate with the seller and the listing agent. Even if you're going to look at something like new construction, what I'm always amazed, and I get calls on, is how many buyer's agents are afraid to actually pick up the phone and talk business and negotiate on behalf of their buyers with the seller and the listing agent. So working with someone that has that track record, really important. Point number 2, getting pre-approved. You as a buyer, you want to know what your options are. You want to know what your purchasing power is. You want to know what loan programs you might be eligible for. Getting pre-approved doesn't obligate you, doesn't mean that you have to go purchase something. It just gives you an opportunity to better understand your financial situation and how it relates to the market that you're looking at. Once you're pre-approved, you know what your purchasing power is, you know what your goals are. Then at that point, start searching for homes. That's step number 3. Your agent will set you up on a filter, on a drip campaign based off of your criteria. And whether it's bedrooms, bathrooms, property characteristics, certain areas, and you'll have the option to go view those homes in person. Once you've identified a home that you want to make an offer in, well, that's step number 4, actually drafting and writing the offer. And again, you want to understand what type of market you're in. So what are your goals? Every buyer is going to have different goals. I'm working with buyers right now, and they want to have the seller to pay for all of their closing costs. As I mentioned, there's other examples where they want to close by a certain date. So you really want to identify what your goals are as a buyer, communicate those to your buyer's agent. That way the contract can be drafted with those in mind. Step number 5 is negotiations and going under contract. Sometimes there is going to be some back and forth. These sellers may accept your offer. They may counter it. That's during the negotiation process. Once you go under contract, that's when escrow is opened up. And that leads us to step number 6. That is when your earnest money is going to be due. You'll deposit that earnest money usually within 48 hours of going under contract. This will also be when the loan is formally underwritten. The appraisal will be ordered. You're going to set up the homeowner's insurance. And it's customary in Colorado, typically, that in escrow period from start to finish is usually 3 weeks to 30 days. So it's kind of in that time frame. Just to kind of give you an idea on the time frame expectations. Step number 7, the final details. During this part, your lender is going to send out the final closing disclosure at least 3 days prior to your closing, so you can review all the final numbers. Your agent is going to do a final walkthrough with you, so you can view the home one last time. And if there were any concerns or if there were items that were supposed to get corrected, you have an opportunity to make sure that happened. And step number 8, the final step, is closing day. That's the day where you get to sign all the documents between yourself and the seller, yourself and the title company, and then you as a borrower and the bank, if financing is applicable, the mortgage or lending package. Once all of that is signed, you then get the keys, the warranty deed is recorded, and the home is officially yours. Congratulations.
Yep, that's an exciting day. So tonight we're going to talk through again the 5 main steps that we've put together that are really the ones that are the biggest, most important, but also the ones that have the most substance and a lot of times the most questions. So go through all of these kind of in quick rapid fire over the next 20 minutes or so. Number 1, getting pre-approved. Number 2, finding that perfect home. Number 3, crafting a winning offer. Number 4, just navigating the contracts, dates, and deadlines. And then last but not least, that final walkthrough and the closing. So we'll start off with number 1, just getting pre-approved for a mortgage. I put in this image today showing today's, and actually, I'm sorry, it was actually last night that I put this in, 6.84%. I'm sure it's probably right around that again today. But Ben, I think what's really important to share on this first point is that I think you're really a great person to share with the audience with is just kind of how to financially prepare to buy a home. Maybe a little bit on like what is, needed, what to kind of expect for that part of the process. But then also we'll have you share a little bit on specifics, like how to improve your credit score if you need to, just some of that stuff. So give us a little background on just what this step 1 entails.
Yeah, why it's so important to get pre-approved is you want to know exactly what your options are. You want to know how much you can get qualified for, what your purchasing power is. There may also be programs that may benefit you that you're not even aware of. First-time homebuyer programs, reduced down payment programs, down payment assistance programs. North Point Bank, for example, we offer all of those programs. And so you want to make sure that you're making informed decisions. Typically, when we talk about a family purchasing a home, we talk about the property characteristics. We talk about the neighborhood, that emotional attachment, the school district. But what sometimes gets left out are the financial considerations. And so I am a believer that you want to set yourself up, not just get the home that you want in the area that you love, with all of the different property characteristics, but you want to make sure that you're setting yourself up for success with the mortgage and the financing terms, and you have a financial vision for yourself. So talking with a mortgage professional and getting pre-approved, it gives you the opportunity to know what your options are, what you're qualified for, and ultimately, so you can make an informed financial decision. A lot of times, I'll talk to first-time homebuyers in particular, and sometimes they can be a little bit hesitant because they think they may not qualify, or they think there's that thing on their credit that's going to hold them back. And a lot of these programs are very flexible. Some of the first-time homebuyer down payment assistance programs will go down to credit scores as low as 620. So you can get down payment assistance for 620. Also, but as we touched on a minute ago, if you're someone that is very sensitive to affordability, as so many home buyers are right now, there's down payment affordability. There's monthly payment affordability. If you're willing to have those conversations with your real estate professional and your lender, they can then tailor a loan to help you with those things. And so at North Point, one thing that we're able to do, if someone does have those monthly payment concerns, or if they want to keep the payment in a certain range, well, we have ways that we can do that. And a lot of times it's through a temporary interest rate buy down. So for example, there's a 1.0 buy down, a 2.1 buy down, a 3.2.1 buy down. And these allow for the interest rate to be lower in the early years, and that's subsidized or paid for by the seller. So the buyer, as you as the buyer, as in these examples, you're not actually paying for this. We would get the seller to pay for it, but we can't do that unless we have those conversations. And so during that pre-approval process, you want to really outline your goals with your real estate agent and your lender. And then you want to be able to have the resources available so you know what your options are and you can make an informed decision. And at that point, you can move forward with so much more confidence when you're navigating through these different homes and some of these different financing packages.
Mm-hmm. And it's not quite as important right now since we are again in that heavier buyers market. So the buyers have the upper hand. But a few years back, sellers would really pretty much require that this would be provided to them with any offer submitted. So when an offer was submitted on a house, the sellers would require not only proof of funds, so showing that the potential buyer, had the ability to afford and buy the home, but then also that pre-approval letter to show that they were legitimate and had that intent that they would be able to actually perform and make it to the closing table. I don't want to go into the weeds too much here, Ben, but I think just it'd be really valuable for anybody maybe that's on tonight that's not familiar with, like, for example, a 2-1 buy down. Give like the quick 30-second explanation of what that is.
Yeah. So what a 2-1 buy down is, as an example, and this is very popular right now. And this was something that was not popular up until recently when interest rates started to go up. So that interest rate that you referenced a moment ago, roughly 6.875. And on a 2-1 buy down, what that means is that in year one, instead of a 6.875, the buyer would get a 4.875. Now, depending on what the loan amount is, that's an incredible savings. On a $500,000 or $600,000 loan, that could be $1,000 saving per month. So for the first 12 months in this example, the buyer would have a 4.875 for year one. And then year two, the rate would adjust to 5.875. And again, not 4.875, but also not 6.875. So there's still a significant savings. It's not $1,000 a month, but it's $500 a month. And then it would adjust to what the note rate is, which would be 6.875. Now, one final thing here, and this is what's so cool about this product. Let's say that interest rates come down 6 months from now, just organically. The Fed reduces rate, interest rates come down. So essentially, the seller is going to subsidize and essentially pay for the buy down. So the seller will give the buyer, and let's say it's $15,000. That $15,000 goes to the buyer's escrow account, and it sits there with their mortgage servicer. So that's the buyer's money. But if interest rates come down and that buyer refinances 6 months later, 9 months later, whatever is in that escrow account, they get all of that money back. So if it was initially $15,000 and after 9 months, let's say that there's $7,000 or $8,000 in there, well, it's not a cost, it's a subsidy. So whatever is in the escrow account, they get all of that money back. So it can be used to reduce their principal balance when they refinance. They can get a check back if they refinance, or it can be applied towards other things as well. So it's just a really, really powerful tool to provide some short-term relief while this market figures out which direction it wants to go.
Thanks. That's helpful.
That was like a 60-second
response,
okay. Not
a lot of content to share with everybody. We don't need to go through all this pre-approval checklist, but this is just kind of a high-level list of a few things that you're going to probably be required to share with somebody like Ben to get that pre-approval. Proof of income, employment verification, credit history, any assets you have, any debt obligations. This could include your credit cards, car loans, any student debt, that down payment, that pre-approval application, and then any property information. This last one you might not have, because I always try and get any of my clients to do this before we even start going out and looking at houses. We really need to know what kind of that price range that you're going to be targeting to find homes within before we even go out and start looking at houses. So that's why it's so important to do this early on. But this is just a kind of a quick overview of some of the things that are going to be needed to finish this pre-approval.
Yeah, and I just want to make one more comment. To your point, it's so important to present the pre-approval letter. And what I do on my pre-approval letters is I outline everything that we have. You know, we have verified the employment, we have the pay stubs, the tax returns, the bank statements, and that just tells the seller that we've done all of our due diligence, and that's going to help your offer as the buyer really, really stand out. More importantly, though, sometimes there can be some question marks, and there's a lot of different types of income. Someone might get overtime, they might get commission income, they might have a second job, maybe they're self-employed. And so different types of employment have different income and documentation requirements. And you just want to make sure as a buyer that there's no surprises. So by getting the pre-approval out of the way up front, you know that there are no surprises. A lot of lenders don't do this up front. I always have, because I want to be able to sleep at night. And I want my buyers to know that when they write an offer, they can write it with confidence and it will close. And maybe this is a stat that I should put on the resume note, but I have never pre-approved a customer in my entire career that I have had to go back and say, oops, you're not pre-approved. Every single time I've sent out a pre-approval letter, that customer has closed because of the due diligence we do up front. And there's a lot of lenders that can't say that because of their business practices.
Mm-hmm. I just want to share one other quick story, you guys. I know that I see like Boris, you're in California. I think it looks like we have maybe several people on from out of state. We have a good friend of ours. We actually went to high school with. Ben and I both went to high school with this gentleman, and I sold his house a couple months back, and he was actually relocating to another state for a job opportunity, same industry, but different job. And he wanted to buy a house it was actually moving out to Iowa. And so Ben, got in touch with him and was helping him with this pre-approval for a home out there. And because Ben was really diligent and because our friend was doing this very early on in the process, we actually were able to, unfortunately came across a little bit of a hang up, which was basically he did not have 2 years of work history to be able to get that pre-approval letter. So what he had to do is basically, work with his new employer to get a couple paychecks. There's just some things that had to be done in order for him to be in a position where he even could buy a home. Ended up setting him back a couple months before being able to buy a home. So he ended up having to rent a house for a few months with his family first. But this is just a great example of, don't wait until the last minute. Don't wait until your partner or your family, whoever you're looking at houses with, don't wait till your wife is like, oh, this house is beautiful, I want this house. You reach out to somebody like Ben to get that pre-approval so you can make an offer, and oops, you know what? We find out that you're self-employed and you've only had your new business for a year. You really need to have it for 2 years before you can get that pre-approval. So there's just all these little, potential issues that could come up. And the best way to avoid any of that is just by doing this very early on. Even if you haven't started looking at homes yet, you're just kind of having this as a goal for maybe 2026. It's still okay to reach out to somebody like Ben today and at least get that ball rolling and just understand a little bit about, maybe if you're not able to get qualified today, what you're going to need to do. At least that way you have a roadmap to get to where you need to go, so you're able to write that offer and buy that house when the time comes.
Yeah, think of it as a discovery phase. You just want to see what
Mm-hmm.
your options are. You want to see what you qualify for. At the same time, you're not obligating, you're not committing yourself, but you want to be able to make an informed financial decision.
And leading me into this, I think this is one of the best parts of our presentation, is mainly because I did not know a lot of this until Ben and I just really started reconnecting a few years back and kind of going through some of these really, really big red flags, things to not do. So there's things you need to do, but also once you've applied for that pre-approval, and basically things that are going to potentially, they could kill the deal, where you get pre-approved, you find the house, you get under contract, and then maybe 2 weeks before the closing, the lender, Ben, for example, they're going to be doing what's called a hard pull or a clear to close, where they're going to just verify that everything's good to go before that closing date. And oops, your credit score just dropped significantly, or there's these things that can happen. And it's just such a big, big, big point here in our presentation to understand that and avoid that happening too, because it can happen and it does all the time. So Ben, just kind of run through these really quick too for everybody.
Yeah, let me share these. And then I actually have a story to tell on a loan that's closing tomorrow that would fit in this category. So number one, you don't want to change bank accounts. Sometimes I'll see customers and they're closing one account or they're moving all their funds into another account, and then they'll write the earnest money check. You don't want to have a lot of, moving back and forth of money. You don't want to change bank accounts. Another big one is you don't want to co-sign for anyone else's loan. Just remember that if somebody asks you to co-sign, it's for one of two reasons. Either they do not have sufficient income to make the payments or qualify for that loan, or they have a repeated pattern of behavior of not paying their bills on time. Now, a lot of times, if somebody's asking you to co-sign, it's more than likely a friend or a family member. And the only exception that I would make to this is if it's for a parent or a child and you're willing to individually take over the monthly payments. But keep in mind, though, regardless, that's if you co-sign, that's going to show up in your debt under the credit report. It can adversely impact your debt to income ratio, which can then prevent you from qualifying or reduce your purchasing power. You also don't want to apply for any new debt. You don't want to have any new credit inquiries, open any new credit cards, go buy any loans. You don't want to make any large purchases. A lot of times, folks are they're eager to move in and they want to start buying their furniture online because it can take several weeks to have the furniture delivered. You don't want to do that. You want to wait until everything's done because the lender will do usually either a soft credit pull within 48 hours of closing, or there's some type of debt monitoring service that they have where they can monitor everything. And so this was the story that I wanted to share from today. And I've never had this happen. So I have a customer that's going through a divorce, and we got everything, got all of her financials, everything's good. Loan is getting ready to close. We have the final approval. But then and I've never had this happen. She told me that she changed her name back to her maiden name. So she changed her name during the process. And so she filled out the application with one name and then went and changed the name back to whatever her maiden name was. And I'm like, she's already got an updated ID. I'm like, you're closing tomorrow. You can, like, the documents you're not going to be able to sign. I mean, there's a notary, there's and so now we're in a little bit of a pickle where we have to go back and either document the name change or push the closing out. And so if there's ever any question, you just want to make sure that you notify the appropriate parties.
And then don't miss that last one also about the don't deposit the cash in your bank, because that's one I think probably happens pretty often too.
It does. Yeah, that's a big one because every loan program, whether it's FHA, VA, conventional, they don't allow cash deposits because cash deposits, at the end of the day, you're not able to adequately source where those came from. And in the mortgage and real estate world, when you're getting approved for financing, every bank, every lending institution needs to know where you're getting the money from for the down payment, that it's essentially coming from a legal or acceptable means. And so you don't want to have those cash deposits at all, or within 30 to 60 days of engaging in a real estate transaction.
Mm-hmm. So that leads us into just your credit. So this is something that, I've learned a lot about over the last, I'm about to sneeze. Sorry, guys. I've learned a lot about this over the past, couple years, things that, just I didn't really know. And I think a lot of realtors, a lot of people in the industry aren't even that familiar with this part unless they've had personal experiences or they've really kind of dug deeper into this. And we're not going to, we want to keep this going forward and not spend all the time on this, but just wanted to at least share with you guys. This is one of the best tips that I can provide you guys with when it comes to your credit score and how to dramatically improve it as quickly as possible. Maybe you're somebody that is in that scenario where your credit score is a 600 and you really need it to get to that 625 or 650 in order to qualify for certain types of loans. So there's what's called a credit utilization score, and it is incredibly important to always keep that under 30%. And I'll let Ben, just as this is a little bit more of his wheelhouse, just kind of quickly share with everybody about what that is, and also just a tip on how to make sure that they're keeping it below 30% so they can have their credit or have their credit quickly improve. I think I've seen as high as like 50 or 60 points over the course of like 90 days. So it's a really, really effective way to boost your credit score.
Yeah, I would say this is probably the number one thing that holds folks back from achieving exceptional credit, other than, collections or late payments. And the reason is they don't understand how it works. Again, there's no financial literacy in our education system. No one ever explains how to use revolving credit or credit cards responsibly. And so people think that if my credit limit is 10,000, I have a Costco card or I have a Visa credit card, my limit's 10,000. Well, that means I can go, spend up to 10,000. And you can. However, doing that is going to adversely impact your credit. You always want to keep that credit utilization under 30% on revolving accounts. Now, it's different for mortgage and installment accounts, loans that are paid back consistently month after month over time. But revolving accounts, home equity lines of credit, in-store charge cards, Best Buy, Costco, Old Navy, stores where you can get in-store credit cards, Visa, MasterCard, American Express. You always want to keep that utilization rate on the card under 30%. And then also, that's referred to as the local credit utilization rate. And then also your global credit utilization rate as well. So, for example, if your credit limit is 10,000, you want to keep that balance 3,000 or under. One thing that I will do is a lot of times I will just go in every week and make credit card payments. I've seen folks that have made their credit card payment on time, not just make the payment on time, but pay the balance in full every month, but they're still maxing the card out. So for example, I was working with a customer earlier this year. His credit limit was 30,000 and he's in the construction business, home improving. And so he would have some recurring purchases where he would need to use all of that, go to Home Depot and some other things, but he would pay it off every month. The problem though, is that the information was reporting to the bureaus when the account was maxed out. So it was bringing down his score around 100 points from where it would have been. So you always want to keep the local credit utilization at 30% under or under. But then let's say that you have 5 credit cards. You want to, if you have 5 credit cards and each card has a $10,000 limit, well, that means that the total limit from all 5 cards would be 50,000. So you want to keep your combined balances also under 30%. In that example, it would be 15,000. So under 30% on the individual card and also under 30% on all of your combined cards or revolving accounts.
And the last thing that I'll add to that before moving on is if you can, and the caveat here is if you can be financially responsible, anytime you get in the offer to increase your credit limit, take advantage of that. And in fact, you can even proactively reach out to your bank and request a credit increase, a credit limit increase. And even if you're not going to use it, it's still good to have, especially when you're in a better, financial situation where you don't maybe have a big balance on your credit. That way they'll be more likely to approve that increase, because all that's going to do is then give you a larger amount total to make that 30% then also be greater. So it just allows you to hopefully keep within that 30% range a little bit easier. Ben, before we move on to step 2, anything last you want to share on financing?
I'm so glad that you brought up that last point there, and very, very relevant. Sometimes folks are there, they don't want to get qualified for too much. And, I do that same thing. I go on my Chase app and I just ask for a credit increase every 6 months. And a lot of times I get it, not so I can be irresponsible or go buy the boat or upgrade the RV or, whatever the case may be, just so my credit utilization rate will be smaller and smaller and smaller. And so it's about managing, it's about understanding how the system works and then managing your finances in a way that are aligned with how the system is outlined.
Mm-hmm. So step 2, finding the right home for you. This is incredibly important for everybody, but especially I see that, since we do have some people on tonight that are from out of state that are considering moving here to Denver, it's even more important to really understand some of these points that I'm going to share with you guys. And these are things that are not only going to benefit you, but really also just as much benefit whoever you are working with, somebody like myself as a realtor, just to make sure that once we do start looking for houses and options for you, that we make sure that we're only providing you guys with the right, selection of homes that fit what you're looking for. So the best thing to do, maybe you guys are somebody that's not seriously looking right this second, but maybe your goal is to buy a home in spring of 2026. a great activity to do with whoever you're going to be living in the house with is just to talk through what your priorities are of the house. And what I mean by that is getting out a piece of paper, maybe do this as like a little after dinner activity one night, and just talk through, in your dream house, what are your must haves? What are your nice to haves? And what, if any, are any deal breakers? So explaining kind of what that means. So a must have would be an example of, let's say right now you live in a 2-bedroom house. You've got your bedroom for your husband and wife, and then you also have a bedroom for maybe a son or daughter that you have, and you got another one on the way. Well, a must have could be that now you need a 3-bedroom house. So that's a must have. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. We need a 3-bedroom house. So that'd be an example of a must have. A nice to have is something that's not necessarily a deal breaker, but it's really nice to have. And again, this is for anybody that's out of state that's considering moving here. You guys might have the same issue where you're coming from, but in Denver and in Colorado in general, we come out here, or people move out here, and we're still here for one of the reasons is it's just a great place to live with all of the outdoor hobbies, activities. There's just so many fun things that you can get involved in: skiing, mountain biking, kayaking, camping. The list goes on and on. A lot of that involves a lot of stuff. So a nice to have that comes up all the time out here is garages. So you might have, a family and your husband and wife, each person has a car. So you think, you know what, 2-car garage, that's fine. Well, once you get your 2 cars in there and you start packing that garage full of your camping gear and your skis and your bikes, give it a couple weeks, and after the bike's fallen down on your wife's car a couple times, or your skis have getting knocked over every time you're trying to get in the house, you're going to realize, man, it sure would be nice to have a 3-car garage. So that would be an example of a nice to have. And then a deal breaker is similar to a must have, but that would be something, for example, let's say you already are here in Colorado. So I know a few of you guys I see that are on tonight are already here. Maybe you're in a really good school district right now. Maybe your kids are in Cherry Creek School District, which is one of the top in the state. A deal breaker could be that we only want to find a home that, our kids can stay in the same school district and be with all their friends that they already have. And so that would be like a deal breaker, just something that we got to stay in the Cherry Creek School District. So those are just examples though, but it's really, really important and really valuable for me as a realtor to get that from any clients that I have. And that really goes a long way for me being a lot more efficient and effective with what I'm putting out there for my clients to then kind of review and give me feedback on. Yeah, we love this house. We don't like this neighborhood. Oh, we don't like this one. It's on a corner, whatever it may be. So that's the first thing I want to share with you guys. And the second part of this is what I love just kind of sharing this with anybody that hasn't heard this concept before is basically there's 3 things, and this is assuming that you have, which pretty much everybody in the United States has at this point, is you have some limitation on funding. You don't have just an endless pocketbook. Most of us, pretty much everybody has, some restrictions on what they can afford, kind of what they're looking for. So 3 things, and most of the time you can get 2 out of the 3. Sometimes we'll find all 3, but it's really important to, if nothing else, identify which 2 of these 3 are the most important. So price, location, and condition. So pretty self-explanatory here. The price of the home, what you can afford or what you want to spend on the home, the location, where in Denver is it located, and then condition is referring to the condition of the home. Maybe it's an older home, maybe it's built in the 1950s, has some outdated mechanical systems, aging roof, that kind of stuff. Or maybe the condition is brand new, like here in the picture. It's a new build community. It's brand new. You're the first one ever to live in it. It's turnkey is another term that sometimes we use, meaning you turn the key to get in the home and that's all you need to worry about. Everything else is perfect. So you got to think about which 2 of these are the most important. So let's say that you are really focused on your price and really focused on location. So maybe your budget is $500,000 and you want to be in, there's a really popular area on the west side of Denver called Highlands and Sloan Lake. You want to be in that area and you have a price point of 500,000. That might still be feasible, but you're going to have to probably sacrifice a bit when it comes to conditions. So you might have to buy a home that's older. You might have to find a home that maybe needs a little bit of TLC, maybe has some opportunities to improve the home over the next couple of years, that kind of stuff. So that would be an example where you get 2 of the 3. You get a good price on the home, you get a good location, but the condition, you're going to have to bend a little bit. You're going to have to sacrifice that one a little bit. I'll just use one other quick example on that same term. So Let's say that you have a price budget again of $500,000 and you only want a new build community. You just aren't very handy. You don't want to deal with leaky faucets or replacing a toilet or any of that kind of stuff. So the 500,000 budget, you definitely want a new build or a new construction home. Well, that's going to dictate a little bit on the location. Where in Denver can we find new build communities that have that price point? We might be then in that case, steering you up towards the Brighton and Erie area, which is a little bit north of Denver. Or we might also be recommending you check out some areas maybe in Arvada or Lakewood. There's just different direction that we can go from once we have a better understanding of which of these three are the most important to you. So just a couple things for you guys just to take away tonight and just start thinking about, maybe share with whoever else you're going to be living in the next home with. And that's going to go a long way when you guys do get serious and start sharing this with your realtor. So this is just to kind of share with you guys. After this tonight, I'm going to be emailing you with a bunch of different leaks, a bunch of just additional valuable resources. On the website specifically, though, I have this interactive map. If you go to adamsillsdenver.com, I've got 20 of kind of the most popular, biggest, most popular areas here in Denver. You can see that little blue picture on the laptop there is the map itself that's on the website. And you can click any of these and you can dive further into them and learn more about what kind of homes are in those areas, what the demographics are, all that kind of stuff. So definitely urge you guys just to check that out. And then if you haven't, definitely also look on the YouTube channel, because pretty much every part of Denver, I've got a ton of videos. I've got almost 150 videos up on the YouTube channel, all kinds of stuff there for you to further explore if you are out of state right now and you're just not sure about where to go. Also have some neighborhood spotlights. I've got actually almost 50 now of, it's kind of like a flyer. It's like a front and back, but it's got individual neighborhoods, my favorite bars, restaurants, parks, trails, farmers markets, just everything that's really great about each of those neighborhoods. So you can kind of utilize that and kind of maybe find a few that are piquing you and whoever else they're going to be living in the home with, what piques your interest on that. And then last but not least, this Locals Guide to Denver. This is also called the Relocation Guide. So you'll get a copy of that too tonight. And that's just kind of similar to this map where it's the 20 of my personal favorite areas that I've just always enjoyed visiting, and a few that I've lived in over the course of my life here in Colorado, and just sharing, what makes those areas so special. So if you aren't that familiar with Denver, those are some great resources for you. Okay, let's jump now into step 3, which is crafting a winning offer. And I'm going to go through this one quick. I don't want to respect your guys' time tonight. So the crafting a winning offer, this is something that is super important even now while we're in more of a buyer market. So even though, sellers are ecstatic for any offers that they're getting right now, it still is super, super important to craft a winning offer and set the stage from day one to make sure that you're going to have a smooth and just really just easy experience once you go under contract. So if you haven't bought or sold a home before, basically the way an offer works is when you find a home that you are really interested in, you want to submit an offer on, your realtor is going to submit that offer on your behalf. And there's basically 3 outcomes that could happen. There's one that's most common and happens, I'd say 90% of the time. But the first one would be that the seller just accepts whatever offer that you submit to them. They accept it as written. So it's listed for $500,000. Maybe you write an offer for $490,000. You have all the dates and deadlines, closing in 30 days, all that kind of stuff. Maybe the seller just is very motivated to sell and they just accept it. Probably the least common of the 3 is declining the offer. And that would be if you're just really lowballing somebody, or there's just something about the offer that just does not sit well with the seller. This also happens more frequently if the real estate agent you're working with is not very experienced and it's just maybe written poorly, where the buyer is getting some kind of red flags where they're a little concerned about, is this really worth accepting? Or maybe they think it's better to wait for a better offer to be presented. So that's the second option. The third one, though, is this one that's the most common, which is a counteroffer. So same example, $500,000 home. Let's just say we offer $490,000. They counter back and they say, you know what? We'll accept if it's $495,000, and we want to adjust a couple of these dates that are in the dates and deadlines. So that's what's known as a counteroffer. So the buyer, we submit the offer, then the seller submits a counteroffer, and then it goes back to us, and we have the option to either accept that counteroffer, decline it, or we could even counter the counter. So maybe there's a few other things that we want to adjust. Usually I have never really seen it go past countering the counter. But there are occasions where we kind of go back and forth a few times. The good news is though, once we're under contract, we can still adjust a lot of like the dates and deadlines and some of those kind of fine points later on. So I always like to write an offer just with the understanding that we want this to be a win-win for everybody. We want everybody that's involved to feel like they're happy with what they're agreeing to and they're on the path to, selling or buying the home and it being a win for everybody. But what I wanted to share on this step 3 point is something that is, I think, one of the biggest advantages for a buyer is having an agent. I really pride myself on being really good with negotiation. And the way I do that is, first off, understanding the motivation of the seller. And that's the one point that I really wanted to kind of hit home with you guys tonight and just help you understand this, because it's crazy how frequently it's not price. So most of the time, buyers are thinking that, we just want, to submit an offer where the seller is going to be happy with the price that we're offering to buy the home for. Well, let's just think through some of these examples. Maybe that one that Ben just shared, where he has that client that's so anxious to change her name back to her maiden name. That's telling me that she probably, maybe had a relationship or she just wanted to get out of there. So an example of somebody like that, where if it's a divorce, they don't care as much about the price as they do about it just getting sold, quick close. We want this off the books. We want to just move on with our lives. That would be one example. Another could be, so right now we're in the summer months. So I'm dealing with this right now with another deal. It's a family. So it's a husband and wife, and they have a son that just graduated from high school. So they're going to be empty nesters soon, and they're downsizing their home. But they wanted to make sure that they could stay in their current home with their son through the summer while he gets ready to go off to college. So that would be another example where, by us understanding what the seller's motivation is, in this case, it's a certain timing of when they want to vacate the home once they get under contract, when they're officially going to hand over the keys to the new owners. By knowing that, before we even submit the offer, we can now write the offer in a way that not only is that win-win type scenario, but it's really speaking to the seller. They're looking a few years ago when it was a much more of a seller's market. Maybe they're receiving 5 offers at the same time. Standard offer, standard offer, standard offer. Oh, well, this one, man, this one's really talking to us. They're giving us this extended closing date, or maybe it's, whatever it may be, but it's just going that extra step. And you do that by having your agent be proactive and reach out and talk to the selling agent ahead of time and just understand what that seller's motivation is. So I'll leave you guys with this. So let's just use that example again of the family with the son who's going off to college in the fall. What we could do in that scenario as a buyer in the offer, we can write in what's known as a PCOA, a post-closing occupancy agreement. And this is something that not that many agents take advantage of, and I've done it a bunch, and I've had a ton of success with this. So what happens a lot of times is the seller, they need the money, the proceeds of selling their home to then be a buyer on that end and make an offer on their new home and have it be a strong offer where they're able to show that they're qualified to buy it. And what ends up happening a lot of times is they're in this pickle where they need to sell their house before they can buy the new house. And if they find a home that they really like, but they haven't sold their home yet, they might still write an offer, but it's called a contingent offer, meaning it's, we want to buy this house, but it's contingent on us selling ours first. If I'm a seller and I get a contingent offer, I'm a little hesitant, because basically if you accept that, you're taking your home off the Zillow and off the MLS, and there's a good chance that, maybe that falls through. Maybe the home that the new buyers are trying to sell so they can buy your home, maybe they can't buy, they can't sell it. There's issues with that house. So what a post-closing occupancy agreement does is it allows you to have a closing date that's sooner. So let's just say today's June 25th. Let's just say that we make the closing date for July 15th. But at the closing, the sellers get all the proceeds from selling their home. After that closing date, though, now they become a tenant. They become a short-term tenant of yours. And that's this post-closing occupancy agreement. It can be for up to 60 days. So you might have somebody that, needs that money. So they agree to sell the home, they get the proceeds. And now when they write that offer on their new home, they can write a much more strong offer where it might still be contingent, but they can display in their offer that it's contingent, but our home's already under contract. We got a closing date in only 2 weeks. It's very likely it's going to close. So now that seller might say, yeah, you know what? We'll accept this. So these are just, again, some examples of what you can do creatively to really make your offer stand out among others. I got a ton of other ideas and just tactics like this that we use all the time. So if you guys ever just want to learn more about this kind of stuff, feel free to reach out. I'll be happy to share more on this one. Okay, Ben, before I move on to step 4, you want to, maybe you can start on step 4, just to give me a chance to catch my breath.
I'd love to do that. Step 4 is the inspection and appraisal process. And these are going to be usually going on at the same time. Sometimes they can be staggered a little bit. Once you go under contract, that means that the seller has accepted your offer or you've agreed to terms. Maybe you as the buyer have accepted a seller's counteroffer, but you're under contract, you've deposited your earnest money, and now it's time for the home inspection. The home inspection is important because you're going to hire a real estate professional who's going to share with you everything that is wrong with the property. And it's important to do that. That sounds kind of negative, but it's not a negative thing because you want to know the ins and outs of the property. You want to know every little thing because you're probably spending hundreds of thousands of dollars. This is going to be the biggest purchase of your life. And so you want to know exactly what you're purchasing. But if there are repairs needed or if there are issues, it can also be used as a negotiating tactic. The negotiating does not stop at the, with the initial sales contract. And so that's also an opportunity. Me as a real estate investor, I've used that strategy frequently. I will get inspections and I will go through and ask for them to get corrected. I will ask for price reductions or seller concessions. And you'd be surprised at how frequently we get that. So keep that in mind. And then at or shortly after the inspection is the appraisal. And so the appraiser is also a real estate professional who's a third party, not related to the buyer, seller, or the bank. They're hired by the bank, but there's no connection with the bank. And they're going to be giving their third party opinion of value. And this is important because you want to make sure that the price you're paying for the home, that the home is actually worth that. Now, you and the seller have an agreed upon price, but the appraiser is going to go look at recent market comparables, usually within a 1 or 2 mile radius over the last 3 to 6 months. And they're just confirming and verifying that the agreed upon price, that the home is really, really worth that. Because the last thing you want to do is pay more for a property than it's actually worth. Now, I haven't seen any appraisals come back less than the sales price in years. And so the market is shifting and is changing a little bit. But in that example, if the appraisal does come in low, you as the buyer have the opportunity then to go back and renegotiate with the seller to reduce the sales price, or you'd also more than likely have the option to walk away from the property. And so these are important because you still have outs. So if you see something on the inspection and it's a concern, you as the buyer, you still have the ability to walk away or cancel the contract. Same with the appraisal.
Mm-hmm. So I'll share a couple other just little nuggets with you guys. So the first one is understanding that not all home inspections are created equal. So a home inspection these days is typically about $450. I've seen though others that are maybe like $250 to $300. It's worth paying that little bit more money to get a really qualified, very in-depth home inspection. And in Colorado, so again, any of you guys that are from out of state, we have a couple that are maybe a little unique add-on inspection services. So you have your main home inspection, but then two that are very popular. And when I say popular, I should say that are really must-haves in my opinion. I recommend both of these for any client that I have. The first one is what's called a radon test. So in Colorado, we have a lot of different types of soils, and we have this what's the word? Not noxious, odorless gas that can be oftentimes trapped in the sublevel of a home. So the beneath, like if your home is not built on a slab, but if you have a crawl space, you have this area of space that's confined and kind of trapped underneath your home. And oftentimes that can generate a high level of radon gas. And radon is odorless, so it's really hard to tell that you even have it unless you do a radon inspection. It's only like $90. They basically put this little device down on the lowest level of the home and have it measure the radon levels over the course of 24 to 48 hours. You can even buy these at Lowe's and do them yourselves if you guys are just curious if you have radon at your current house. But it's an example of an add-on inspection that is super, super important, only if the home doesn't already have a radon mitigation system. Radon systems are typically about $2,500 to get installed. But if the home doesn't have a radon mitigation system and you do this test and it ends up showing up that it's a little bit elevated, it's above 4. I forgot the measurement that they use, 4 MPS or whatever the metric is for it. But if it is above that, then that's really considered a health and safety item on the inspection report. And those are 9 out of 10 times accepted by the seller to give either a seller concession or having it fixed before closing. So this is one that is very frequent to get some money back to my clients before buying the home and giving them the ability to install this before closing or have that money available to then do it themselves after the closing date. And then the other one is a sewer scope. So Colorado, we have a lot of trees, obviously, and a lot of these trees have roots that have a mind of their own. And maybe buy a home that's built in the 70s or 80s. And when the home was built, there were just some tiny little trees in the front yard. And now all of a sudden these trees are 40, 50 feet tall and the roots have gone all over the place. And those roots maybe have kind of impeded on the clay. If they're older, the sewer line that goes from the house out to the main sewer line, if it's in a municipal area, oftentimes the roots can affect that. They can either kind of impede on the actual pipe. Sometimes they'll create what's known as a belly, so kind of a flat spot in the sewer line. And again, these are things that if identified, they have a camera scope that they put down and identify any issues that might be concerning. This is just another thing that's about $125 for this add-on inspection. And it just gives you that peace of mind that you're not buying the home 2 weeks after you move in. You know, you guys, maybe you're a bigger family than who was living there previously and using the toilet and the shower and all that stuff more often. And you get it backed up into your house. You know, what a bummer. You buy a house and within 2 weeks, you got this, sewer backup, and sewer lines can be very expensive. I had a home about a year and a half ago that had a little bit of an issue and they were quoting it to be $30,000 to get it repaired. So it could be a major, major thing. Sometimes it's enough where after that's identified, the buyer just says, you know what, I'm going to get out of this. I don't want to continue on. I'm going to, leave and go find a different home. So those are two very, very important inspections that are worth doing. And what I want to share though with you guys too, before moving on, is so when you have an inspection done and the inspector comes back with anything that he's found, you have what's called an inspection objection and an inspection resolution. So the inspection objection is for the buyers, for us to tell the sellers, well, these are the things that the inspector identified. There's a, maybe 40-page document that the inspector provides us with. These are in red. They're health and safety related. Maybe there's, carbon monoxide detectors that are over 10 years old, or maybe there needs to be one in a room where there isn't one yet. Those are, again, almost always agreed to by the seller to get addressed. Maybe there's also some other things that come up. Maybe the age of the roof, the age of the windows, structural issues, maybe the AC, the mechanical system's old, whatever it may be. When you're able to hopefully object to some of this stuff, and then in the inspection resolution, that's the seller either agreeing to or maybe coming back. Again, another little bit of a negotiation going on here. But let's just say you get a $10,000 agreed upon amount of money to account for whatever these inspection objections were. And Ben, I want you to kind of touch on this. You have a couple options here. You could have that $10,000 be taken off of the sales price of the home. So now instead of a $500,000 home, you can have it be $490,000. Or what's crazy is you can actually use that money and use that to buy down your rate if you're using a mortgage, if you're going to have a loan on the house. And it's just amazing the difference between those two, how much you can save with one versus the other. So Ben, just maybe kind of explain that a little bit and just how that can really work to your advantage as a buyer when it comes to this part.
Yeah, if I asked you a question as a buyer, would you rather buy a home for let's say the home is listed at 500,000, and if I gave you the option to purchase the home at a $10,000 discount, so instead of buying the home at 500,000, you'd get it for 490,000, so $10,000 discount. So that's option A. Option B is you pay $500,000 for the home, or you get a $10,000 seller credit that you can use for anything. Now, from the seller's perspective, both of those options are considered identical offers because the seller will net the exact same. But you, as the buyer, they are very, very different. And it ultimately depends on what your goals are, what's most important to you. Now, what I would do, because this is what is most important to me, is I more than likely would take the $500,000. So I would actually pay more and then use the $10,000 seller credit to pay for all of my closing costs, my prepaids, my homeowner's insurance. And I would literally come into closing with $10,000 less out of pocket. So if I structured it that way, the only thing that I would come into closing with would be my down payment. Now, if I pay more for the property, it means that my amount financed is going to be higher. But because the loan is amortized over 30 years, the monthly payment on that loan is going to be, there's going to be a very, very small difference. And so the ultimate question is, would you rather have an additional $10,000 in your pocket today and have a monthly payment that's roughly $50 higher per month? Or would you rather come into closing with $10,000 more and have a monthly payment that's roughly $50 less per month? There's no right or wrong answer. It's just whatever your personal preference is. And then to your last point there, Adam, there are some creative ways to use that $10,000 instead of a sales price reduction to, buy down the interest rate or do a temporary buy down. And so that's why it's so important to have a goal and a vision for yourself as it relates to the financing terms. You want to have a vision, and then you want to craft an offer that's in line with what that vision is.
I don't know what it is specifically in Colorado, but I saw a statistic about 6 months ago. I think it was actually just sharing what the 2024 average was nationwide for how much homes were on average giving as a seller credit or a seller concession. I think it was right around $10,000 was the average nationwide. So nationwide, the median home price in the country was like $460,000 last year. So you think about Colorado probably being a little bit higher than that. That might be, instead of a $10,000, it might be closer to 15,000. So that's kind of on average. Every home is different, but that could just be kind of that dollar amount that you might be expecting to get in seller credit, seller concessions after this inspection phase. If it's a home that, has some stuff that we can push back on. If it's a brand new home, a new build community, I wouldn't be expecting that much. But, if it's a home built in the 70s or 80s, there's a good chance that you're going to be able to get some of these, concessions, especially if you have a good realtor that's just, working through that negotiation phase.
I have two loans closing on Monday of next week, June 30th. I have one closing tomorrow. So three loans over the next 3 days. Every single one of them has seller concessions. One of the ones on Monday, the sales price is only around 420,000, but the seller concession is nearly 12,000. So that's 3% of the sales price. So that's the type of market that we're in here in Denver. Buyers are able to get the seller to contribute that concession or that seller credit. And then you, as the buyer, you get to use that however you want.
Mm-hmm. I'm just going to kind of skip over this slide. This is just that certification that I have and just some of the examples of how negotiation can really work to your advantage as a buyer. So step 5, we'll run through this one quick. So closing and final walkthrough. So the final walkthrough, just what that is, maybe you guys aren't that familiar with what a final walkthrough is. So we're under contract. We've got our closing date, like maybe Ben's example of next Monday, the 30th. I think next Monday is the 30th. That's our closing date. Usually within about 48 hours before then, we have the lender reach out and say we're clear to close. And that's basically that final pull of credit pull of financing and just the ability to perform at closing and make sure that we're still on track to have a successful closing. So what happens though is, let's just say the closing is on Monday, say the Monday at 10 a.m. I always like to do a final walkthrough the day of, not 3 days before, not 2 days before, the day of, if possible. And what this is it's just whether it's myself and my client. There's different scenarios depending on what's going on. I noticed that, like Boris, you're out in California, maybe some of these other people that are on tonight from other states. If you're not able to get out for the closing, you can always do the closing remotely. You can do so much on Zoom, just like we're doing this awesome masterclass tonight on, online. You can do your complete closing also virtually through something similar like this. You'll have a third person in addition to the title officer, title rep, coming on to that, that Zoom call, which is going to be I'm drawing a blank. What do you call, Ben? What do you call the person that notary? Sorry, guys, I'm drawing a blank there. You're going to have a notary come onto the webinar and be able just to verify you are who you are. So that's going to happen if you're a virtual closing, an online type closing. But so in that case, it would maybe just be myself that would go out and do this final walkthrough the morning of. And this is so critical because there's some horror stories out there. You get a home under contract, you love the home, you close, you go to the home, and you didn't do a final walkthrough, and oh my God, that beautiful chandelier in the dining room, it's gone. It was there 3 days ago. Where is it now? Oh, well, the sellers, they didn't put it in the fine print that it was an exclusion, meaning that they were taking it with them after closing. If they didn't put it in as an exclusion, that means that's part of the deal. That stays. But there's a lot of times where that seller might, try and get sneaky, maybe take some stuff out of the house that really is your property and part of the offer. So there's just so much importance behind doing that final walkthrough, not only to just ensure that everything is there, but also, man, it's crazy with some of these stories that you hear about. And actually, I have a personal story of something similar to this, where I have a good friend of mine, not a client, but just a friend of mine, that Easter Sunday decided to turn on his sprinkler system for the spring, and went down to his basement, tightened up the little valves that he needed to do, got the water turned back on. It's Easter. He's got his little kids having fun doing the Easter egg hunt, so he's probably a little bit distracted. Ends up, leaving for the day to go visit his mother-in-law's house for some more Easter stuff. They get back that night, and their basement is flooded with like 2 feet of standing water in their basement because he didn't tighten a little valve the correct way. So there could be a scenario like that. Maybe you find a home that you love, you get it under contract, and that home's already vacant. The sellers have already, moved on to their new home, so the home's just sitting empty. Maybe somebody's checking on it once a week, but maybe not. And maybe something like this happened. Maybe it's in the winter months and a pipe froze. All kinds of scenarios that could happen. But by not doing that final walkthrough, if you go to closing and you sign, that's your problem. So by doing this final walkthrough, there's been plenty of times where in that final walkthrough, things have been found, and might need to push that closing date out a couple days to figure out what the heck is going on and get whatever it is resolved, just to make sure that you're not going into a major and very expensive potentially issue. So that final walkthrough doesn't take more than an hour, and it is just super duper important. So, and then closing day, you guys know already what that's all about. Ben shared a little bit more on that earlier. So it's an exciting day. For a lot of people, it's one of the most exciting days of their lives. As Ben said earlier, it's for many, many people, it's the largest, financial purchase they'll make in their entire life. And that's something to celebrate. So it's usually taken anywhere from about, 28 days to maybe 45 days to go through this entire contract to close, from going under contract to the closing date. So, there's a lot of different dates and deadlines throughout that. And it's exciting just to finally make it to the finish line and celebrate. Before I share one last thing, Ben, is there anything else you wanted to share on any of those 5 points, those biggest 5 kind of journeys, 5 steps in that home buyer journey?
Just in a very brief summary, I just want to make sure that you as a buyer, I talk about vision a lot. I talk about having a plan, and you want to make sure that you're working with professionals that have experience, for the specific type of transaction that you're looking at. So if you're someone that is a first-time home buyer and you want down payment assistance, you want to be working with a lender that specializes in down payment assistance. If you are someone that is really going to want to take advantage of this market and use the leverage that you have as a buyer, you want to work with an agent like Adam that has experience negotiating, making the phone calls, figuring out what the seller's motivations are, crafting that winning offer, getting it accepted, but also putting your goals and your vision first. So that's always my biggest talking point is craft the vision first and then craft the offer.
Love that. So these are just kind of a recap, you guys, the 3 big mistakes that home buyers make. I made this little slideshow for a piece of content on my social media a couple months back, and I thought it was relevant for this presentation tonight. So 3 big mistakes. We've kind of talked a little bit about this already, but the first one is just overlooking hidden costs. And we didn't really talk too much actually about this on the first of the 5 steps tonight when Ben was sharing a lot about the pre-approval process and some of that stuff. But it's important to know that there are other costs outside of just the price of the home. So let's just say you buy that $500,000 home and you have that mortgage dollar amount you got to now be planning on for every single month. But there's other stuff on top of that. There's these other hidden costs. There's going to be property taxes, insurance, maintenance, potentially an HOA, a homeowner association monthly or quarterly fee, depending on where the home is located. When it comes to property taxes, and I'll just share this for anybody that is out of state, every state's different when it comes to property taxes. In Colorado, we have on average, it's 0.6. So right about 0.5% is the overall average of what a annual property tax amount is. So if you're buying a $500,000 house and let's just use a 0.5 instead of 0.6, so 0.5%, you're going to be looking at $2,500 a year annually as your property tax bill. However, different areas can be dramatically different from one another. Anytime you're finding a home that's in a new build community, any home that's maybe in an area of town that's still really getting developed, if you look at Denver on a map, it started off pretty tight, and it's just slowly expanding. We're seeing all of this growth and development up north of Denver into areas like Brighton and Erie and Thornton and Northglenn. You're seeing a lot of expansion out to the south and to the east in areas like Aurora and Littleton. And any of these areas that are just basically being built out on just open space at the moment, it's requiring a lot of other just stuff to pay for, not necessarily not completely just you, but just overall. So roads, infrastructure, civil engineering type stuff, all that can be somewhat accounted for in a higher property tax. So in an area like, I always use one that's near me. I live in Littleton, which is south of Denver, south of downtown Denver, a little bit to the west. There's this really, really cool, beautiful new build community called Sterling Ranch. Sterling Ranch right now, their annual property tax rate, instead of 0.6, it's actually at 1.4 or even a little bit higher in some areas close to there. So that same $500,000 home, instead of a $2,500 annual amount you need to be budgeting for, you're looking at close to $7,500. That's a massive difference. So when you're starting to look for homes and you're getting that pre-approval done, you just need to make sure you're understanding that there are going to be some other costs involved in making sure that you're accounting for that when you're doing your budgeting and that pre-approval. So that's always a big one I like to share. Insurance is such a hot topic right now. Every state's different. So sorry, Boris, I keep using you just because you have where you're from and your name down there about California. But so states like California, they're going to have a lot of issues with wildfires. Colorado, actually, we also are dealing with that. We had a massive wildfire right around Christmas and New Year's a few years back, just outside of Boulder in the middle of winter. It damaged, I think, over 1,000 homes, like decimated them. So now insurance is hard to get in Denver, and there's even some companies that are completely leaving the state. I think Progressive might be one of them. So anyways, insurance has gone up dramatically in states like California and also here in Colorado. So, I've heard horror stories of, families that have bought a home 3, 4, 5 years ago, and their budget is allowing them to, maybe pay one amount of money for their insurance, and now it's triple that. And if you're on a fixed income, that can be a big deal. So insurance is just another one just to be very mindful of. Maintenance, if you're buying an older home, it could have some preventative or just some additional maintenance required. maybe you buy a home that's built in the 70s and its AC and mechanical systems for heating and cooling are 20 years old. Well, maybe it'll last another 10 years, or maybe it's going to go out in a year. And if it goes out, that could be a $15,000 fee or expense. So that's, things that you just need to be aware of. HOAs, homeowner association fees, those can vary. There's some that are very, very low, $30 a month. There's others that can be $500, $600 a month if you're in a really luxury type community with gated access and lots of amenities and all that kind of stuff. So just being very aware of some of these hidden costs. Number two, this is obviously something I'm passionate about, neglecting home inspections. Always, always, always do a home inspection. And the only thing I'll add to this one, even if you're buying a brand new home, a new build community, brand new home, why would I need to do a home inspection? This house is brand new. I bet there's just as many issues with those as there are with older homes. And it's for things like, a lot of these construction guys, they might just, not be paying quite as much attention. Maybe that sewer line that we've been talking about, maybe there's a bunch of debris in there, construction debris. I've had examples where the sewer scope gets done on a new build. They find all kinds of, construction paper and stuff that's clogging up half of the sewer line. So, obviously very important that we still had that done. I will just leave you guys with this on this point. If you're buying a new build community, a new home and a new construction home, the alternative is you could schedule your home inspection at about month 10 after owning the home. So nearly every new build community will offer you a 1-year home warranty. So what you can do is you can have this home inspection done at about month 10, and that home inspector is going to identify all this stuff and give that to you to basically then go to the builder and say, all right, well, our 1-year warranty is coming up. Here's 10 things that we've identified as being issues that we'd like to get fixed before that month 12, where we're no longer going to be able to ask for this to be remedied without having to pay for it out of pocket. So that's just a little bit of a kind of a happy medium, or I'll concede sometimes with my pushing this on my clients. Pushing is probably not the right word. I'm just so passionate about recommending that these are always done. So if somebody does really push back and they don't want to spend that $500 on the home inspection, $400 for the main one, and maybe the radon or the sewer scope, if you're not going to pay for it, then still at least do it around month 10, just so you have that ability to hopefully get some money back in your pocket or have anything maybe fixed that needs to be before that warranty expires. And then this is a big one. I'll let Ben kind of get on his soapbox on this one a bit, but this is something that just both for realtors and for lenders, we just see all the time. And I understand it. I've been guilty of this before as well, but we're human. We're human beings. We're emotional at times, some more than others. And it is crazy how we can let emotional decision-making get the best of us versus really making a sound, probably the better choice with some of this stuff. So, since this is one of the biggest decisions of most people's lives, biggest financial purchase they've ever made, even though that home is perfect and your wife loves the white picket fence and loves the special claw-footed bathtub in the master bathroom and all these little things that she's so emotionally attached to, get that out of her head, get that out of your head, and just still think about this in a very level grounded type mindset. Ben, what do you have to add to that?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's why I think it's so important for you as a buyer to really outline and have that vision for yourself. I've mentioned that word vision, but I'm talking about financial vision, and identify and put those boundaries on paper when you start the process. What are you comfortable having as a mortgage payment? Write that down. I'm comfortable having my mortgage payment be X amount of dollars per month. Are you flexible on that if you found the right home? What I see, especially first-time home buyers make, is the bank might qualify you for a mortgage payment of $5,000 a month, but that doesn't mean that you need to go find a home with a mortgage payment of $5,000 a month. So I see a lot of first-time home buyers that will go right up to that very max of what they're qualified for. But then what happens when life happens? The birth of a child, maybe there's a loss of income, the economy retracts. And so you want to make sure that you are on secure financial footing and you have a really defined plan, a defined vision, and an outline for yourself financially, you know what you're comfortable paying, and that will kind of help reel in some of these emotional decisions and some of these emotional feels that you're going to experience as you go through the process. So very important, and that's always my suggestion.
Yep. Okay, so next steps. Well, you guys made it through that. I really appreciate you guys sticking around. It's awesome that we've got practically everybody still on tonight after 90 minutes. So thank you first off for sticking around. I know, like I said, that's, information by a fire hose, just a ton of stuff we've been throwing at you, but I know some of it's kind of dry, some of it's interesting, but I know it's a lot to take in. So thank you first off for just sticking around with us. But as far as what to do next to move forward, and hopefully by now you guys realize that neither Ben or myself are pushy. We're not trying to sell you on using us necessarily. We just want to be a resource for you, just to make sure that you guys are making the best decision possible if this does end up being a dream and a goal of yours. But as far as next steps and how to move forward, like Ben was really hitting hard at the beginning tonight about getting that pre-approval. There's also different levels. There's what's known as a pre-qualification, a legitimate pre-approval. There's like 3 different levels of that. So even if maybe you're not ready to have all of that information ready to provide somebody like Ben, if nothing else, just reach out, just maybe get on a 15-minute call with him and just, open that line of communication, maybe get a couple of questions answered that you're not 100% certain on yet. And that way you're able to make any pivots, maybe make any adjustments. So when that time is coming and you're ready to buy a home, there's no curveballs, there's no issues that come up that is going to prevent you from performing when you really want to. Next up, work with a real estate expert. That's somebody like me, just really helping you understand not only the city of Denver, but also how to navigate that home search and make sure you're getting the right homes put in front of you to make that best decision possible. Definitely educate yourself as much as possible. I'm proud of you guys for just being on the call with us tonight and just putting your time and effort and energy into just learning more about what goes into this. Just keep doing that. There's a ton of resources that we're going to be sharing with you guys tonight. Dive into any of that you have questions on. Reach out, ask anything that maybe you're not certain about after going through them, and just be patient, stay informed. Don't be emotional. Just realize that this is a big decision. Take your time and make sure you're making that right decision. So all of that stuff's going to be sent to you guys via email after the call, but also you can get all of this on my website. So if you just go to adamsillsdenver.com, there's a button on top that says helpful guides. You can get all of that here. It's all free. It's all downloadable. If you guys are local, I also have hard copies of all this stuff, and I'd be happy to drop one off if that's an easier way for you to kind of digest this information. So reach out if that would be helpful. And you can also just scan this QR code if you'd rather just get it right now and have it a little bit easier. So with that, let's one more slide. Definitely that 30-minute strategy call with me is helpful as well, since there are so many different things we've talked about tonight. If you have specific questions, I would love just to help answer those on a one-on-one. We can do it via Zoom. We could do it just over a phone call. You can just do it over text or email, whatever is most convenient. So feel free to reach out. I'd love just a chance to connect. And I guarantee I can provide some value to you today, whether or not you're considering moving next week, next month, or maybe not for 2, 3, 5 years from now. I'd still love just the chance to connect with you guys. So I really mean that. So please reach out. I know Ben feels the same way. If you do want to schedule that, just go to adamsillsdenver.com. There's a contact button on there, and you can access my calendar there and find a time that's convenient for you. And with that, all right, drum roll. We got the questions. Ben, I'm going to kind of field a couple of these to you. I'm going to pull this up really quick. Let me get the questions. Oh, I apologize, Derek. I didn't have this open. I just saw that you had actually sent a couple questions over. And Ben, thanks for fielding those. First, I'm getting a little bit of a reverb on the. Ben, you mind putting yours on mute for a second? I think so. A couple of these, I think, looks like they just got sent to me directly. I got one from Boris. Hey, Boris. So Boris is interested in a duplex. Hasn't I don't know if Ben, or I don't know if Boris, if you've actually found one yet, or you're just considering that as an option. Is there anything different with buying a duplex versus a single family home? I think that's kind of the question that you're getting at. Ben, yeah, I know Ben's a great person for that, just with his real estate investing experience. I got a couple thoughts on that one too. But Ben, you want to just share any just quick kind of highlights on what might be worth considering for Boris in that case?
Yeah, from a financing perspective, if you are planning on occupying one of the units, you can actually call the duplex and a primary residence and finance it as a primary residence. So a couple different reasons that's important. Number one is it may allow you to put a reduced down payment. FHA, for example, you're only required to put 3.5% down. So you could technically purchase a duplex with an FHA loan and have the option of putting as little as 3.5% down. Conventional is the same way. The down payment requirements are a little bit different because it's a different program, but you still have the ability to call that a primary residence. Number two, when the appraiser is appraising the property, the lender will also order a market rent analysis on the property. And for that other unit, whatever the market rent comes back at, you'll be able to count that towards your income, which is awesome. 75% of whatever the market rent is. So that can help from a qualifying perspective. And then just overall in general, I'm a big believer in duplexes, multifamily. Obviously, you want to make sure that it checks all the boxes from an investing perspective. I own several duplexes myself. I own 4 duplexes out in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And but you want to make sure that you are, analyzing and evaluating those in a way that the property is going to serve you short term, medium term, long term. And Adam is a great resource for that on the acquisition and the purchase side. And I'm a great resource just from my personal experience.
Sorry, I had my mic muted. I'd like just to share 2 additional things with you, Boris. So the first one is there's a great website to check out. It's free up to a certain amount of uses per month, and it's rentometer.com, rentometer.com, rentometer.com. And you can actually type in the address of any house or duplex, triplex, or quad, fourplex. Type that into Rentometer, and it's actually going to give you within I think it's a half mile, 1 mile, 3 mile, and 5 mile radius, any of the average rents that are being gotten right now for that type of home. So you can basically just use this to run I like to use the word napkin math, a way for you just to kind of see, all right, well, this is a duplex. Each side is a 2-bedroom, 1 bath. All right, so 2-bedroom, 1 bath in this area. Well, the average rent ranges from $1,200 to $1,600 a month. Oh, I saw you writing on there. It's almost that, Derek. It's actually rentometer.com. Let me 1 letter off there. So anyways, that's a great way just to kind of start doing some deal analysis or like being able to figure out if the numbers even make sense. So that would be my first suggestion. And then the other thing I just would like to add to that is in real estate, if it's 4 units or less, you can buy that with a traditional type loan through somebody like Ben. Sometimes, or I should say probably all the time, the interest rate on that type of a property is going to be maybe slightly higher than just a single family home or a condo or an apartment. But you are still able to qualify and buy that up to 4 units. And a lot of people, as a starter home, or maybe you're trying to get into real estate investing, you can do what's called a house hack, where you live in let's just say you buy a fourplex. You live in 1 unit, you kind of self-manage the property, and then you rent out the other 3 units. And ideally, those other 3 units monthly rent is paying for your complete mortgage. So now you're also living for free. That might not be the most ideal situation long term, but at least maybe you're able to do that for 2 years, build up a little bit of equity in the property. And then maybe at that point, do a 1031 exchange, which is a way you can sell that and then roll any sort of profits from that house into the next like property, meaning you have to buy another investment property within a certain period of time. But that way you can avoid paying any taxes on your capital gains and just roll that and use all of that money into your next investment. So that's a great way just to kind of get started in real estate investing. But if it's over 4 units, then it's actually going to be what's known as just a commercial loan. It's a totally different type of loan. Usually it's going to require at least 20% down, if maybe even 25% down. So there's some different qualifications for that. So just a couple things to consider if you are really interested in duplexes, triplexes, or fourplexes. Let's see here. What else? I can't see who wrote this. It doesn't have the name. They're just asking about the interest rates, and it's a pretty common question, especially for you, I'm sure, Ben. The interest rates are killing us. What do you expect over the next year or two?
Yeah, that's a great question. If you asked analysts, economists, and there's been a lot of surveys, there's been a lot of articles written on this topic, but everyone really had expected interest rates to come down by now. Now, the Fed, in their most recent meeting, which was last week, they did not reduce the Fed funds rate, but they did leave the door open for a couple of rate cuts later this year. Right now in Congress, there's that big, beautiful bill. And depending on how that is perceived by the market, there's been some reports saying that could cut the deficit. There's been other reports saying that would add to the deficit. When when the debt grows in the U.S., it can impact treasuries and treasuries that are tied to mortgage interest rates. And so with that long-term debt, getting bigger and bigger, people are starting to kind of keep a closer eye on that. So having said all that, I'm still optimistic at some point that rates will trickle down. I don't think that we're going to see the 2s or the 3s. I think more realistic would probably be low 6s, high 5s. This last couple of weeks, the market has improved a little bit. Most importantly, though, and we've been kind of, this is my thing as a lender. We have been kind of brainwashed as a nation to really just get over obsessed on interest rates. What I always encourage folks to do is look at the affordability. What does the interest rate mean for you? What does the monthly payment look like for you? And if it's something that you can afford and it's something that you're comfortable with and it fits in line with your financial vision, then it's something that you can consider. But if it's not, then now is maybe not the right time. The mistake that I see people make, though, is they try and time the market. So they try and time the market, meaning that they sit on the sidelines and wait for the perfect time. I have a couple of buyers that I can reference that were waiting for values to come down. This is back in 2020 and 2021, and values have gone up several $100,000, and so they missed out on $100,000 to $200,000 in equity because they were waiting for values to come down. And so when you're thinking through things like this, the best way to help analyze what is the appropriate decision, because ultimately we're talking about decisions and judgments, how to make responsible, sound financial decisions and judgments. And this is an exercise that I do. I ask myself, what am I, if I'm thinking about buying a property, am I going to own this property or am I going to be in this mortgage 5 years from now, 10 years from now? If I'm a first time home buyer, once I get into the game of home ownership, am I planning on staying there? And so if you have a long-term financial outlook and you feel that you're going to, own real estate and you plan on being a homeowner for the rest of your life, having that outlook and that plan is really going to drastically reduce the risk today. Now, the person that can't say yes to that, maybe they're thinking about moving back home or, to where their parents are at, or relocating markets, or maybe they're in the military and they get bumped around. Maybe their job might relocate them and they're unsure. Well, to that person, it matters a lot more because, timing really does matter if you can't say yes to those things. So, again, try and define what that outlook looks like for you, and that will provide some clarity on what to do in the present.
That was really good advice. I think there's just one more here. I'm hoping I don't know if it's Celeste or it's kind of spelled a little bit different here. Celeste. Anyways, she's just asking about short-term rentals and whether that's a good strategy. So I know, Ben, you got probably some good stuff to share on this one, but the one thing I'll just maybe first point out to you, Celeste, hopefully I'm saying your name right, is in Denver at the end of last year, I think it was in November of last year, Denver, so the city of Denver. So Denver, we have the actual city of Denver, but then we have all these other areas around, like where I live in Littleton. And actually in Denver, so downtown Denver and the surrounding areas, there's a lot of property and homes in the Denver proper city of Denver. They actually dramatically loosened up their restrictions on short-term rentals. And specifically, they actually started allowing, they cut out a lot of the red tape to get approved for an ADU. So an ADU is known as an accessory dwelling unit. And that's basically a separate second dwelling on your property that you can use as a mother-in-law unit, maybe just like a guest house, maybe an art studio, or what a lot of people are actually doing is they're using that as like a short-term rental, as a nightly rate rental that they can have as an additional source of revenue, maybe help pay for that mortgage, maybe just give you some extra play money, maybe help pay for that vacation, whatever it may be. That used to be very, very, very difficult to do in Denver. And in fact, Denver had a moratorium, meaning that they put a halt where they weren't allowing any new applications for short-term rentals. Short-term rentals were such a hot thing to do about 8 or 10 years ago. And, I think it kind of got oversaturated, where nowadays, it was much more challenging to find properties that would even allow that. But Denver now is much more lenient on that. So one strategy you could have is find that great home that you want to live in. Make sure that it has a large enough lot size where there's easement, or there's a certain amount of feet off of the property lines to give you an area where you could build one of these. You could actually buy a lot of these, even prefab. I know even Costco sells some of this type of stuff at this point, but you could actually install and build an ADU on your property and have that even be like a short-term rental. So that would be one option. If you're just going to rent out your actual primary home as that short-term rental, I would just recommend diving a little bit deeper into some of the covenants and restrictions that maybe that subdivision that you're looking at has. Where I live, for example, they do not allow any short-term rentals. However, one other kind of roundabout way to still make this work for a lot of people is you can still do midterm rentals. So midterm rentals are 30 days or longer, and these are really popular for people like traveling nurses. So you're going to have it a little bit different structure where it's going to be furnished. You're going to need to be out of the home for 30 days or more. So maybe that doesn't work with the scenario that you're trying to achieve, but that's something to at least look into. But I would just recommend maybe diving a little bit deeper into the city of Denver's easing of restrictions with those ADUs, accessory dwelling unit. I've done some really good videos actually on that on my YouTube channel. If you go to my Living in Denver YouTube channel and just search ADUs or value add properties, you'll find some videos that I've created specifically on that. So maybe do that. And if you have any other like specific questions, schedule one of those strategy sessions with me, and I can kind of learn a little bit more about what you're trying to accomplish and hopefully steer you in the right direction. Ben, you want to add anything to that? I think this is the last question, so maybe just help answer that. If anybody else has any questions before we end it tonight too, feel free to type them in the chat. It looks like the last chat with Derek was just kind of direct. Some of these other ones I'm not seeing. I don't think, Ben, you're seeing it's like just directly to me. So feel free either way, you guys, just to write any comments you have if you have any questions.
Any other comments, please share as we wrap things up. My final thoughts there in real estate, you really do make your money on the purchase, on the buy. And when you buy right, it is going to allow you, whether it's a primary residence, long-term rental, short-term vacation rental, medium term, it's going to give you so many more options and flexibility. It's going to allow you to be dynamic. I have purchased properties that were my primary residence that were then converted to long-term tenants. I have had other primary residences that I've sold over the years and taken the proceeds and invested in other real estate that ultimately allowed me to go purchase short-term vacation rentals and some other properties. So it's really understanding the game, knowing how to use leverage responsibly and understanding how to put your equity to work for you. And tonight we didn't get an opportunity to touch on this, but really learning how to leverage the equity in your property through a home equity line of credit. Again, not to be responsible, not to go buy the boat or the RV or go on the dream vacation, but to make that money work for you. And that's a specific strategy that I have used to really accelerate and expand my personal real estate portfolio. And maybe our next time we can kind of get into that a little bit more and some of those other details.
Mm-hmm. And if you guys haven't, not to shameless plug here, but if you guys haven't checked out our podcast yet, the Pursuit of Progress podcast, Ben and I have a few really good episodes on there where we dive a little bit deeper into short-term rental strategies, some of that stuff. So, if you have any kind of specific questions, Celeste, that you want to, reach out to either of us, we'd be happy to help answer that for you. And one last thing before, just while I think of it, Derek, I know you mentioned that you had some internet connection issues where you kind of came in and out. I always put the recording of our webinar, tonight's webinar, on YouTube I don't leave it up permanently, but I leave it up for about 24 to 48 hours, a little bit longer if needed. But if for some reason you feel like that would be valuable to, watch a couple sections that maybe you had internet issues with and you got cut out for a bit, feel free to just I'm going to send you an email here in a bit that will just give you all the links that we've been talking about tonight. Just respond to that email and I'll send you a link for the actual recording of tonight's class, and you can utilize that as well. But every one of these that we do they're all a little bit different. We're always sharing the updated market info as well as some other stuff. So even if you've attended tonight, I know it's going on almost 2 hours. So it's awesome. You guys we still have, I think, like 8 or 9 people here. So this is awesome. But if you guys, want to join the next one, feel free. We always are talking about what's going on currently and helping out with anything that we can. So happy to assist.
We're here. We're, and I share Adam's sentiments. I just want to be a resource to the folks that I work with. I want to be able to add value. I remember what it was like to buy my first home. I remember what it did for my family as a 12-year-old boy when my mom, single mom, was able to buy her first home for us, and how much that meant and what that did, and the hopes and the dreams that it gave us, and how it stabilized our housing. And so those are the stories that I remember. I remember going and getting my earnest money check on the first home that I bought. I remember the name of the teller that helped me, and and these are the memories and the stories and the experiences that I want to be able to help others get the opportunity to share and be a part of. So I'm here. Adam is here. We want to be a resource. We want to be able to help guide you. We're not going to be making decisions. We're not going to be telling you what to do, but we are going to be folks that you can count on to put you first and help you craft your vision and help you identify what is in your best interest. Ultimately, you're the decision maker, and whatever you decide, I support, we support.
I think it's one of the things I love the most about real estate is there are literally hundreds of different ways to be successful in this game, whether it's just buying a single family home for yourself or for your family and living in it long term and building up that equity, or maybe it's fixing and flipping homes. There's another really cool strategy that Ben and I are big proponents of called the BRRRR strategy: buy, rehab, refinance, rent, repeat. We can talk about that in a separate conversation, but there's just a lot of different ways to be successful in real estate. And in comparison to things like stocks and other investments, you have more control and it's tangible. You can actually enjoy this investment. You can live in it. You can have it as a rental property. There's just so many creative things that you can do that makes me just always gravitate towards real estate over other ways to be financially responsible and build up long-term wealth. Cool, guys. Well, we'll just stick around for another couple minutes, but feel free to check out. And just one last time, guys, thank you so much for joining us. I know this was a lot, and we're just here for you. So we appreciate your time tonight and look forward to connecting with each and every one of you guys in the near future, and hope everybody has a great 4th of July weekend. Stay safe and enjoy wherever you may be next weekend.
Love you guys.
Yep. See ya. I'm just going to end the recording, Ben, and then I'm just going to stick around here for a minute.